Down here in Bray Cove, it's been a very interesting week with the amount of winds that we have had. If you have had the opportunity to be out fishing in the past few days, from Thursday till Monday, it's been extremely interesting with the amount of wind. Can you fish it? Sure. Is it difficult? Absolutely. So, getting to some of these areas on those types of windy days, man, you have to really kind of burn some shoreline or stay as protected as much as you possibly can, or you're just going to take a tail whip and getting across some of that open bay area. So those are the kind of things you have to take into account on those types of days, or just not fish at all. And, well, tomorrow will be a better day. So I've done that before as well. But some of the areas that you can do that are places like down here in Bray. You can get here on that southeast shoreline there, and you can get protected down there. You can get in the back lakes. We had a little jump in the water levels that pushed in for us, so we've had a higher tide, so that's been very helpful, especially in these back lakes. It's been super low for a while, but now we've got a push of some water in there, so that kind of revives some of those type of areas. You can get back in there, like this particular back lake right in this area here. It's one of my favorite ones for me personally to get into that and just kind of work the shoreline, work out in the middle of it because it gives you lots of opportunity that's in there. Of course, the primary structure that we are working over moving forward, we're kind of transitioning away from muddy areas and getting back into the sand and shell reefs and shell bars and stuff. So those are kind of starting to really light up more consistently now that we're here at the end of April and fixing to transition into May. So just a really great thing that you can start to move and expand your fishing areas. So make sure that you take that into account. Like I say, we're still catching some fish over mud, but we're not just fishing super muddy areas and grass. It's hard packed stuff, shell. That's all in and around these types of areas. You got around here on the point here in Mesquite. You got shell bars that are out there. We're catching fish off of these. Down the shoreline, we've got a little bit better sandy areas that are more packed. It's got some grass that's kind of infused in there with it. So a lot of these areas that hadn't had a lot of grass in the last couple of years are starting to show itself, and that's a very good thing. That's a plus thing for us. Working all this up here and the air's dugout. Lots of shell around there. There's been plenty of fish that's been caught around there. Now, again, you're catching some smaller fish, but the fish that we were catching in that new slot, the 15 to 20 range, we're catching them in the 17 to 19 range. If you're keeping some of those, that's fine. But and we've caught several that are in that 21 to 24 inch range as well. And I think that's just a direct result from the temporary sizing in there right after the freeze. And this new size limit's not going to do anything but help that and help those numbers to get up there to where they need to be, where you're going to consistently catch more quality fish. So it's exciting to know about that, and we're seeing the results of that here and there. So, but we're working these areas out and around here, around Fish Camp and all that area up in there. You got all this shell in here, and you got little guts and fingers that are out there. So there's fish that are holding on that, both trout and redfish. Pull out an occasional flounder here and there. Still throwing 16th ounce jig heads, even though our water temps are in the mid 70s pretty consistently now. Air temps are mid to upper 70s as well, so that ambient's really going to help control that water temp for a while. I don't see anything in the foreseeable future that's going to drop that temperature for us. May have some rain showers here and there that are coming, but outside of that, it's going to be in those 70s for a while. So, we're wet wading and covering these, so it's really nice to get out of the waders now after about 4 or 5 months. But again, going back to the baits and stuff, we're throwing the down south in the original and the burner shad, especially through that full moon. The full moon for us during that phase was some tough days on the water because it just wasn't super productive. Even around those bite frames, it was just tough. We had to really grind in some areas. But it happens. That's part of fishing. So you just have to kind of figure things out and adjust your optimism and your perspective as far as what you think is a quality day on the water. But that said, we still caught fish. We're still in any particular area that we were in. It just wasn't great numbers, and that was fine. But we just kind of took that in there with the big moon in play. Now that we're on the backside of it, we're in our transition days, i.e. wild card days. Take those into account. You can put a lot of different baits in your box right now if you want to. So that's what we primarily threw the original and the burner shad, through the knock and tail in multiple different flavors. Primarily the main ones, the greenback and the rogue flavor in that. And of course, in the burner shad for down south, the primary bait that we liked it as far as productivity went was the mud minnow. It was very good for us. We had a little sprinkled in of some purple rain and bone diamond were good as well, but mud minnow was the most productive for us. And then of course in the original size, the big papa was good, white ice, bone diamond was pretty good for us as well, and twisted tea. Those were all flavors that were pretty good. And there was a few other ones that were sprinkled in there with a different flavor on it, but those ones I just mentioned were the most productive during that time frame. Throwing the soft dine, the small version, didn't throw the XL, just the smaller version of it, just because we wanted to stay with that smaller profile. Just sticking with that game plan and letting that play out for us, and it pretty much did its thing. So every once in a while we'd try to put on a bigger bait just to see, and we'd catch a few with it, so we kind of changed our perspective a little bit. So once we did that a few times, so we had different baits, different sizes. So we went with the supermodel all the way down to the burner shad, and of course the knock and tail, and then of course the soft dine. Little John's, another one that was productive for us in different flavors. Watermelon red, I think, was the most productive in that size, depending on what your water clarity was and everything. So just like I say, we'd focused on our majors and minors during that time frame and just kind of fished the conditions that were presented to us. If you have to deal with those high winds like we've had in those past few days, you just have to find areas that you can stay protected, that you can safely get to protect or to fish those protected areas. So always keep that in mind, man. It's a big deal to make sure that you pay attention to what that weather's doing, because, man, you can get in some of these areas out here and you get yourself in a little bit of predicament. Down here in Spalding, we haven't spent just a tremendous amount of time back in this area here in the last couple of weeks. We've been pushed back further south, but we're really kind of focused on the Spalding area this past week, a couple of days. Again, with the fluctuation of our tides and stuff that we had coming up with that water level, and so it kind of opens up more areas for us, so we can get back in some of the little back lake areas. I like to fish these little areas back in here, just wade back into those little guts and fish those edges like that, and see if you can't find some redfish or maybe even a quality trout getting ready to lay up. And that's another thing that we've noticed too. A lot of these trout are starting to push up on these grass beds and grass flats, so it's really key for you to start focusing on those types of areas. These fish are, like I say, this consistently up in the 70 degrees, so they're really going to want to start laying eggs. And we've even caught some that's gotten pretty skinny, so they've already dropped some eggs in some of them, but there's still quite a few that's got eggs in them. So if you don't need the fish, trout-wise, don't need to keep it right now. If you catch one that's got that little bit of belly on it and it's got that redness to their belly, throw them back, especially if they're in the slot, because they're fixing to get ready to lay those eggs. And we can take the egg laying over keeping fish any day of the week. So there's going to be a time frame here in about another 2 to 3 weeks, and most of them will be dropped their eggs by that point in time, especially with our water temps being where they are. So just keep that in consideration when you're out fishing. We get back in these back lakes up in here. All that opens up for us. Then we get back into these back lakes back in here. Of course, I've said this in the past before. This one particularly right here, you can come in through Carlos and dock your boat right there on the beach side of it and just walk across the land and drop into that one if you want. It opens you up even to more back lakes that are really close proximity to that. So keep that in mind whenever you're in here if you don't want to get your boat in there, because there's quite a bit of shell in some of these back lakes. If you're not sure where they're at, then you're going to kind of ding your boat up a little bit. So we don't want to do that. So just give yourself other options to get into some of these back lakes, but they can be very productive. But you got to get in there to fish them. Primarily what we've used back in these, we've just been throwing plastics. A few topwater baits have been good for us. During that moon, we threw the lay a little bit back in these back lakes. It did pretty well. Just a regular Spook Junior or a Mansfield Knocker has been pretty good for us as well as production-wise, primarily white or silver or gray belly. And we've had some pretty decent opportunities with that. A lot of fun anyway, just to watch them blow it up, even if they miss it. But still, you still get some opportunities with it. So again, throwing that burner shad during that time frame, throwing the original size during that time frame. If you have a hard time controlling the depth of what your jig head and what your plastic dives down into the grass, and you're constantly getting hung up, go ahead and rig it up weedless. It's fine. Your hookup ratio is going to go down a little bit, but you keep yourself out of that grass until you can kind of perfect that, because there is a little technique to that, little knack, just to keep it out of that grass. It's just a rhythm thing, and just throwing baits plenty of times and be able to understand that depth of how it falls. But that said, any of that back in here has been pretty decent. Like I say, we fished this little reef that's right here on this other side of Carlos in here, just kind of hung out around that there. And of course, that opens you up to Cedar Dugout that's right over here. All these areas have been fairly productive. Like I say, it was a tough grind days on some of these full moon days. We had some tough days on the water. We didn't catch just large numbers of fish, but we were catching fish. It was just tough. And, sometimes it's that way. So you just have to take that and move on. But every day that you're on the water, you're going to learn something if you allow yourself to. But working these shell pads, like I say, the more that we're working the shell, we're seeing more and more fish show up on it on a consistent basis. So make sure that you put that in to your plan for the day. Whatever your plan is, make sure you work it, stick to it. Just have you one laid out there. Give yourself plenty of options on your baits as far as colors goes, because when those winds blow up, Carlos, Mesquite, North Aransas, all those areas, they get pretty nasty. Even like the fingers in Carlos, it gets pretty chocolatey there. So you really have to adjust accordingly. So that's kind of where the chartreuse comes in a little bit. Even though I don't like to throw it, but in those conditions I will. I'll tie one on just to see see if we get any type of opportunities with that. But anyway, we took our time, worked these areas really well. Be patient during these slower times during that big moon. And again, transition days, wild card days, you're going to have the same type of days. But with the water influx that came into us, we're going to get more options and more places it's going to open up for us. So just take that into account. Make sure that you continue to work the majors and minors. That's going to produce for you, and enjoy your time on the water. Yeah, down here on the Redfish Lodge shoreline all the way out to Rattlesnake Point, we've worked the little guts. You've got some shell that's out there, little spoil islands that are left over from just time. And then you got this big, nice little sandy flat that comes all the way out here to the cut. And you got that broken down duck blind that's out there, and it comes all the way back in there toward Pete's Bend area and this whole backside. All nice little easy wading areas, especially on the north side of one of the Redfish Bay side or the Redfish Lodge side. With these bigger winds that we had for a few days, those are areas that you could get to and stay protected back in there and just not beat you up. Of course, if you use the little sand ramp there off of 188, then it's a pretty easy run to just get to that point. Because if you were coming around from Copano Bay Bridge trying to fish down there on those particular days, it was a tough go. You just have to take your time, get as close to the shoreline as you could to take away some of that. But if you run out in the open water out there, you took a little bit of a tail whipping to get to that point. But once you got there, it did pretty well for us, pretty productive. Again, big moon was in place on a couple of the days that we were back in these areas. So we really had to take our time, really just kind of let the bite happen for us. And when the bite frame did kind of kick in, it wasn't a super, super long bite frame. Most of the time it was early in the bite frame or maybe just a tad bit before that window that came about, but you paid attention to it, you could see it happen, and it was pretty neat to watch it all unfold for us. And we just took advantage of it for as long as we could. Some of the days it would take a little bit longer for it to kick in, and of course it would kind of trickle down throughout the whole window, and then we'd just work it and just kind of stayed with that smaller profile. Again, burner shad size primarily, mud minnow, the original size. We'd sprinkle in a 5-inch here, there, down south. The knocking tails, the same. What's primarily the 4-inch, and even they have the little 3-inch when we threw that in there every once in a while, and it did okay. Soft dime, mirror lure, little johns. Those are the main things. Some paddle tails from Marker 54, little 4-inch there that did pretty well for us. So like I said, it wasn't any one particular bait in these areas that just kind of dominated. So we had multiple people that were fishing, so it made it easier for people to try different things, and we can kind of narrow it down better just to see. But as far as the consistency of it, what we want, it primarily the 4 and 3-inch baits that were doing well for us, and it didn't really matter as far as which particular brand we were throwing. They just wanted that profile size, so that's kind of what we stuck with. Again, 16th-ounce jig heads, working these areas, still giving it plenty of time to work down in the column. We working that thigh to waist deep water, out over shale, sand. We could find the grass and mixed in there with it in some of the areas where we were catching some nice redfish that were in there. So, say good trout mixed in there as well. A lot in the slot, some below the slot, a couple over in the in-between slot. But nonetheless, it was good. It was fun. It was productive on particular days that we were there. So, like I say, if you can safely navigate to these areas on the big wind days, then do it. You still can fish it. It's fish are not going to run away from an area because it's too windy. They're not too worried about that. Moving water is always a good thing. It keeps that current, whether it's wind driven or tidal driven. You still got moving water. So just kind of set yourself up, make your plans accordingly. Whether you're fishing in Rattlesnake, or if you're fishing in Port Bay or Swan or up in Turtle Pen or in St. Charles, wherever, just put that plan in play and execute it, stick with it, and see what's going on. Say if you got 2 or 3 people that are fishing with you, each one of you put on something a little bit different size, profile-wise, and color, and go to work and see what you find. And trust me, if you pay attention to what's going on during those majors and minors, you'll see the productivity over a consistent day in and day out time frame if you're able to do it for that long. But if you're just a weekend fisherman or a one-day-a-week fisherman, just apply some of these techniques and these type of things, and it will definitely help with your production of your fishing day.